Hi, I'm Tathra Street, a leadership futurist. What does that mean? Well, it's more about why than what. After listening to Chike Ukebu at the Above All Human conference last week, I was thinking about his reasons for why he's running for president, and I got inspired. He said there were 4 things that inspired him to run as a 35-year-old for the presidency of Nigeria: a sense of hopelessness, a lack of vision from current leaders, discrimination of his people, and no one else was stepping up. So what are my reasons? It brings to mind my coming-of-age experiences, 3 of which I'll mention here. It was as though the pedestal fell, and it fell hard. I became distrustful and angry at the facade about how things are portrayed. I felt I had to put on my own facade to be regarded as professional and strive for agency and legitimacy. This gap between our authentic selves and who we feel we need to be to meet social expectations is a big part of what human-centered leadership is about. More on that in a minute. When I was looking for my first job after high school, I watched others around me get work because of who they knew, not because of what they could do. It was a very close-knit community, and having moved there after living in the city only a few years earlier with a single mother who didn't work in the same town that we lived in, well, it wasn't doing me any favors, unfortunately. So I got to a point where I felt like I needed to give up on my aspirations and just take any job. So I found myself working at Willie's Motor Inn. Yeah, it could have been worse, but on my second day, it was about 30 degrees. It was really hot. I wore what I thought was a reasonably dressy top. It was sleeveless, and I was told that that wasn't professional. So I learned that I had to put what was practical and what would meet my needs aside for what fits the considered expectations of what's okay for a woman to wear to work. Another standout experience was being invited to the home of David Suzuki, who I was really inspired by and expected more of the same, meeting him in person. I remember his walls were full of the most amazing Aboriginal art that I'd ever seen outside the Museum of Anthropology. We found him having a beer, complaining about politics, and he was really quite focused on being angry at Mike Harcourt, who was the current premier of the province. And he was not happy with some of the decisions that he'd made. And so I saw this lament as a frustrated, flawed human being, and I was quietly devastated at age 17. I learned to be angry and frustrated. Fast forward a few years, and in my second year of university, news that $7 billion was being cut from the national education budget meant that it was going to be a 20% fee increase for Canadian university students. There was a national student walkout which also inspired a few bank occupations organized by the Canadian Federation of Students, because, well, the banks were going to be responsible for student loans going forward, and we were furious. So I was part of organizing a nonviolent direct action with a radical group who didn't think that the Canadian Federation of Students was going far enough. So occupying the banks sent a far stronger message. And honestly, I had some great experiences with this activist group, but after a while we noticed the power dynamics becoming evident, and trust started to break down, leading to the eventual demise of the group. And I learned that how we behave toward each other in groups is no different if you're a bunch of anarchists or any other group of humans. We are creatures of habit. And we live what we learn early on, depending on who's around us. And I learned a lot from the experience, and I still like to live by my own rules and question the status quo. And, it informed my ideas about human-centered leadership and the reasons why I believe we can do better as human beings on this planet. And we aren't consciously creating a future that we fear. And it doesn't have to be that way. Hence, Leadership Futurist. What I notice now is that human-centered leadership, well, it's aspirational, and it doesn't always come naturally. So when people come to me and they want me to help align their values with their behavior, some of them, well, they'll say things like, I find myself giving orders when I really want to just empower my team and trust their judgment. This is only natural. But to become more human-centered, it's going to take a concerted effort and intention to interrupt the patterns of our learned behavior. And that's what we do in leadership coaching. And I've learned from my own experience this is possible, and that it's one of the biggest reasons why being a leadership futurist is important to me. I believe that we can accelerate this change in the style of leadership to one we can be proud of. And if you want to be part of this, if you're doing this work and you want to do it together, let's talk. Sign up to my newsletter and we can change the world together.